morning, good afternoon, or good evening from wherever you're watching or listening. My name is Caleb Glick. I'm a lawyer here in the great state of Texas with the Calhoun School of Law to bring you a lot of information plenty of bad folks would rather you not have. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we'll provide another installation into our Anti-Federalist Papers series going on number 40. So if you haven't gone back and watched 1 through 39, I would highly encourage you to do so because understanding the Anti-Federalist Papers, in addition to the Federalist Papers, will provide you a very well-rounded, advantageous understanding of the U.S. Constitution, and understanding the U.S. Constitution will be absolutely necessary if you intend to combat any sort of lawfare waged against you, your loved ones, or your hard-earned property. Excellent. So let's go ahead and jump on over to the Anti-Federalist Papers. There are multiple places from which you can get a copy, both paper and digital, of the Anti-Federalist Papers. Go ahead and get both, just in case you can't access one or the other for whatever infinite number of reasons. While you're out there looking, go ahead and get a paper and digital copy of the Federalist Papers so you can join us in comparing and contrasting the arguments for and against ratifying the U.S. Constitution. Excellent. So number 40 is titled On the Motivations and Authority of the Founding Fathers. This was going to be pretty interesting. Anti-Federalist number 40 is a compilation of articles. So let's see what these articles had to say, what their critiques were of the new proposed government. It was a common saying among many sensible men in Great Britain and Ireland in the time of the war that they doubted whether the great men of America who had taken an active part in favor of independence were influenced by pure patriotism, that it was not the love of their country they had so much at heart as their own private interest, that a thirst after dominion and power and not to protect the oppressed from the oppressor was the great operative principle that induced these men to oppose Britain so strenuously. This seemingly illiberal sentiment was, however, generally denied by the well-hearted and unsuspecting friends of American liberty in Europe, who could not suppose that men would engage in so noble a cause through such base motives. But alas, the truth of the sentiment is now indisputably confirmed. Facts are stubborn things, and these set the matter beyond controversy. The new Constitution and the conduct of its despotic advocates, ouch, show that these men's doubts were really well-founded. Unparalleled duplicity. That men should oppose tyranny under a pretense of patriotism, that they might themselves become the tyrants. How does such villainy disgrace human nature? Ah, my fellow citizens, you have been strangely deceived indeed. When the wealthy of your own country assisted you to expel the foreign tyrant, only with the view to substitute themselves in his stead. This is quite the heavy accusation. But the members of the Federal Convention were men, we've been all tried, who have been, I'm not sure what that typo is supposed to be. We'll skip over it. Were men been all tried in the field of action, say some. They have fought for American liberty. Then the more to their shame be it said, cursed on the villain who protects virgin innocence only with a view that he may himself become the ravisher, so that if the assertion were true, it only turns to their disgrace. But as it happens, it is not truth, or at least only so in part. This was a scheme taken by the despots and their sycophants to bias the public mind in favor of the Constitution, for the convention was composed of a variety of characters. Ambitious men, Jesuits, Tories, lawyers, etc. formed the majority whose similitude to each other consisted only in their determination to lord it over their fellow citizens, like the rays that converging from every direction meet in a point. Their sentiments and deliberations concentered in tyranny alone. They were unanimous in forming a government that should raise the fortunes and respectability of the well-born few and oppress the plebeians. Philadelphiensis. Does our soil produce no more Washingtons? So here's a different pamphlet, or a different article. Does our soil produce no more Washingtons? Is there none who would oppose the attempt to establish a government by force? Can we not call from the fields, the counters, the bar, and mechanic shops any more generals? Is our soil exhausted? And does anyone suppose that the Americans, like the Romans, will submit to an army merely because they have conquered a foreign enemy? Signed, an American. Another article. I revere the characters of some of the gentlemen that composed the convention at Philadelphia. Yet I think they were human, and subject to imposition and error as well as the rest of mankind. You lost 8 or 10 years of your lives in labor by the last war, and you were left at last with your debts and encumbrances on you, and numbers of you were soon after the close of it sued and harassed for them. Your persons have been put into a loathsome prison, and others of you have had your property sold for taxes, and sometimes for 1/10 of its former and actual value, and you now pay very grievous and heavy taxes, double and treble what you paid before the war. And should you adopt this new government, your taxes will be great increase to support their servants and retainers, who will be multiplied upon you to keep you in obedience and collect their duties, taxes, impositions, and excises. Some of you may say the rich men were virtuous in the last war. Yes, my countrymen, they had reason then to be so. Our liberty then was in dispute with a mighty and powerful tyrant, and it was for their interest to promote and carry on the opposition as long as they could stay at home and send the common people into the field to fight their battles. Holy biscuits. What a brutal letter. After the war began, they could not with decency recede, for the sword and enemy were at the very entrance of their gates. The case is greatly altered now. You conquered the enemy, and the rich men now think to subdue you by their wiles and arts, or make you or persuade you to do it yourselves. Their aim, I perceive, is now to destroy that liberty which you set up as a reward for the blood and treasure you expended in the pursuit of and establishment of it. They well know that open force will not succeed at this time, and have chosen a safer method by offering you a plan of a new federal government, contrived with great art and shaded with obscurity, and recommended to you to adopt, which if you do, their scheme is completed, the yoke is fixed on your necks, and you will be undone, perhaps forever, and your boasted liberty is but a sound farewell. Be wise, be watchful, guard yourselves against the dangers that are concealed in this plan of a new federal government. Signed, a farmer and planter. That's a very important article to remember. Even Washington was not immune to the allure of tyranny. Remember, not even a decade later, after being implemented as president of this supposed union formed by the U.S. Constitution, he forces at gunpoint 500 Pennsylvanians to pay an unconstitutional, unrepresentative, abusive tax. What was the main chant during the Revolution that Washington was the general of? No taxation without representation. Yet, not even a decade after he's elected to office, after he's appointed, I should say, to an executive office, he deploys 10,000 troops to go and force 500 Pennsylvanians to pay an unrepresentative, abusive, unconstitutional tax. And we know for a fact he knew it was incorrect. We know for a fact he knew, Washington knew it was wrong, because he pardoned every person involved. He knew. He's not immune to the powers, and that's exactly what the farmer planter was discussing. These individuals, aristocratic, maybe even well-intentioned, like Washington, all of this new power can't be trusted to even the best of them, to even the best of men. Do not give up the power. So here's another article. Make the best of this new government. Say it is composed of anything. So now we're playing devil's advocate. Let's play in the best possible terms for this proposed government. Make the best of this new government. Say it is composed of anything but inspiration. You ought to be extremely cautious, watchful, jealous of your liberty. Or instead of securing your rights, you may lose them forever. If a wrong step be now made, the republic may be lost forever. If this new government will not come up to the expectation of the people, and they shall be appointed, their liberty will be lost, and tyranny must and will arise. I repeat it again, and I beg gentlemen to consider that a wrong step made now will plunge us into misery, and our republic will be lost. What do you hear often today? What do you hear the Union being referred to as? Democracy, a constitutional democracy. No, it isn't even a singular constitutional republic. It is a union of multiple independent, sovereign, unique constitutional republics. It will be necessary for this, the Virginia Ratifying Convention, to have a faithful historical detail of the facts that preceded the cession of the Federal Convention and the reasons that actuated its members in proposing an entire alteration of government, and to demonstrate the dangers that awaited us. It's an important detail. The Philadelphia Convention, what we're told was the Constitutional Convention, was premeditated, not on completely reforming the standing government, but for commercial purposes, for amending the standing government, not for replacing it with a U.S. Constitution. That was the preclusion. That was what was propagated to the states. They lied. And ultimately implemented, not through ratification, but through force, a new government. If they were of such awful magnitude as to warrant a proposal so extremely perilous as this, I must assert that this convention has an absolute right to a thorough discovery of every circumstance relative to this great event. And here I would make this inquiry of those worthy characters who composed a part of the late Federal Convention. I am sure they were fully impressed with the necessity of forming a great consolidated government instead of a confederation. That this is a consolidated government is demonstrably clear, and the danger of such a government is, to my mind, very striking. Remember, Madison, the father of the U.S. Constitution, in the Federalist Papers, I think it was in the 50s range of the Federalist Papers, said verbatim, the U.S. Constitution isn't supposed to form a nation, isn't supposed to consolidate the states, isn't supposed to form a state or a country. It only forms a union. That's what he said. And he reiterated that not long after that in 1798 with the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions. Now, I think it was Jefferson who wrote Kentucky's nullification resolutions, and then Madison wrote Virginia's resolutions. But the point being, Madison was well-intentioned. He said, no, the U.S. Constitution is not forming a nation, state, or country. It forms and upholds the Confederation. It forms a union. This Anti-Federalist says, reading through the Constitution, that is clearly, demonstrably, clearly incorrect. You are lying or you are very naive. We later found out that Madison was very, very naive. But at least he admitted to his fault and helped Jefferson ultimately get elected, and of course led a fairly long generational fight against future presidents and future federal officials, officers in general, whenever they attempted to secure more power and consolidate more power to the federal government. That this is a consolidated government is demonstrably clear, and the danger of such a government is, to my mind, very striking. I have the highest veneration for those gentlemen, but, sir, give me leave to demand, what right had they to say, we the people? Oh, but if you look at the Council on Style, the only reason they changed we the people of the states of so on, so on, so on, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New Jersey, so on. They listed every single state in the original preamble. The only reason we changed it from that to we the people was to save ink. That's it. There's no reason to be worried. There's no reason to be concerned. We're not forming the American. We're not forming a singular body of people. No, you silly billies. There's no reason to be concerned. That was the argument made by the Committee on Style. And this Anti-Federalist is saying, why does it say we the people? Not supposed to be forming a nation. Not supposed to be forming a state or a country. My political curiosity, exclusive of my anxious solicitude for the public welfare, leads me to ask, who authorized them to speak the language of we the people instead of we the states? Very good question. States are the characteristics and the soul of a confederation. Exactly. You cannot be a citizen of a union. You cannot be a citizen of a confederation. You can be a citizen of a state, and your state can be a member of the union or confederation. That's it. If the states be not the agents of this compact, it must be one great consolidated national government of the people of all the states. I have the highest respect for those gentlemen who formed the convention, and were some of them not here, I would express some testimonial of esteem for them. America had, on a former occasion, put the utmost confidence in them, a confidence which was well placed, and I am sure, sir, I would give up anything to them. I would cheerfully confide in them as my representatives. But, sir, on this great occasion, I would demand the cause of their conduct. Even from that illustrious man who saved us by his valor, I would have a reason for his conduct. That they exceeded their power is perfectly clear. The Federal Convention ought to have amended the old system. For this purpose, they were solely delegated. The object of their mission extended to no other consideration. You must, therefore, forgive the solicitation of one unworthy member to know what danger could have arisen under the present Confederation, and what are the causes of this proposal to change our government. Signed, Patrick Henry, one of the greatest orators. We will definitely be going over his other pennings and orations. He mainly had orations because he was just so well known for his oratory skills. We'll definitely be going over his other papers in the future. Here's another article. What then are we to think of the motives and designs of those men who are urging the implicit and immediate adoption of the proposed government? Are they fearful that if you exercise your good sense and discernment, you will discover the masked aristocracy that they are attempting to smuggle upon you under the suspicious garb of republicanism? When we find that the principal agents in this business are the very men who fabricated the form of government, it certainly ought to be conclusive evidence of their invidious design to deprive us of our liberties. The circumstances attending this matter are such as should in a peculiar manner excite your suspicion. It might not be useless to take a review of some of them. In many of the states, particularly in this, Pennsylvania, and the northern states, there are aristocratic gentos of the well-horned few who have been zealously endeavoring since the establishment of their constitutions to humble that offensive upstart, equal liberty. But all their efforts were unavailing. The ill-bred churl obstinately kept his assumed station. A comparison of the authority under which the convention acted and their form of government will show that they have despised their delegated power and assumed sovereignty, that they have entirely annihilated the old confederation and the particular governments of the several states, and instead thereof have established one general government that is to pervade the Union, constituted on the most unequal principles, destitute of accountability to its constituents, and as despotic in its nature as the Venetian aristocracy. A government that will give full scope to the magnificent designs of the well-horned. A government where tyranny may glut its vengeance on the low-born, unchecked by an odious Bill of Rights. And yet, as a blind upon the understandings of the people, they have continued the forms of the particular governments, and termed the whole a confederation of the United States, pursuant to the sentiments of that profound but corrupt politician Machiavel, who advises any who would change the constitution of a state to keep as much as possible to the old forms. For then the people, seeing the same officers, the same formalities, courts of justice, and other outward appearances, are insensible of the alteration, and believe themselves in possession of their old government. We'll also be going over Machiavelli's work. Thus Caesar, even though he wasn't the most friendly-minded of liberty and mankind in general, understanding his principles as it comes to deception, manipulation, and governance for tyrannies will be greatly to your advantage, of course, when understanding how these tyrants exactly think, how these well-horned individuals believe, and how they truly understand you, your existence, and how much they can mold your perception of your God-given liberties. So that's why we'll be going over Machiavelli's work in future lectures, of course. Thus, Caesar, when he seized the Roman liberties, caused himself to be chosen dictator, which was an ancient office, continued the Senate, the consuls, the tribunes, the censors, and all the other offices and forms of the Commonwealth. It's a common strategy for tyrants and dictators to maintain or upkeep these supposed machines of liberty and maintain checks and balances, when in reality, that's done exclusively to provide crumbs to the citizenry so that they don't realize the whole loaf is being consumed by the tyrants, by the aristocrats. So if you're ever asking, well, if lawfare is true, if the ABA is really as powerful as you say, Caleb, then how did Scalia ever get on the court? How did Clarence Thomas ever get on the court? How about Samuel Alito? There's your explanation. Because if you notice, the sane-minded justices, the sane-minded jurists, or more sane-minded jurists, are always outnumbered by almost double. So there's your explanation. It's a doctrine provided verbatim from Machiavelli. It's a Machiavellian doctrine. Anyway, I digress yet again. Commonwealth, and yet changed Rome from the most free to the most tyrannical government in the world. The late convention, in the majesty of its assumed omnipotence, have not even condescended to submit the plan of the new government to the Confederation of the People, the true source of authority, but have called upon them by their several constitutions to assent to and ratify in toto. In toto is Latin for just in total. I don't know why he didn't just say in total. What they have been pleased to decree. Just as the Grand Monarch of France requires the Parliament of Paris to register his edicts without revision or alteration which is necessary previous to their execution. If you are in doubt about the nature and principles of the proposed government, view the conduct of its authors and patrons. That affords the best explanation, the most striking comment. The evil genius of darkness presided at its birth. It came forth under the veil of mystery, its true features being carefully concealed, and every deceptive art has been and is practicing to have this spurious brat received as the genuine offspring of heaven-born liberty. So fearful are its patrons that you should discern the imposition that they have hurried on its adoption with the greatest precipitation. After so recent a triumph over British despots, after such torrents of blood and treasure have been spent, after involving ourselves in the distresses of an arduous war, and incurring such a debt for the express purpose of asserting the rights of humanity, it is truly astonishing that a set of men among ourselves should have the effrontery to attempt the destruction of our liberties. But in this enlightened age, to hope to dupe the people by the arts they are practicing is still more extraordinary. The advocates of this plan have artfully attempted to veil over the true nature and principles of it with the names of those respectable characters that by consummate cunning and address they have prevailed upon to sign it. And what ought to convince the people of the deception and excite their apprehensions is that with every advantage which education, the science of government and of law, the knowledge of history, and superior talents and endowments furnish the authors and advocates of this plan with, they have from its publication exerted all their power and influence to prevent all discussion of the subject, and when this could not be prevented, they have constantly avoided the ground of argument and recurred to declamation. Hamilton. To declamation, sophistry, and personal abuse, but principally relied upon the magic of names. Emboldened by the sanction of the august name of a Washington that they have prostituted to their purpose, they have presumed to overleap the usual gradations to absolute power, and have attempted to seize at once upon the supremacy of dominion. Signed, Sentinel. Unfortunately, the very, very, very applicable, very beneficial quote from Mr. Mark Twain did not exist at this time. It is easier to fool someone than to convince someone they've been fooled. That plays exactly to that previous paragraph of what Sentinel was speaking to. So here's another article. Seems like this one's going to be a longer one, so go ahead and buckle up and get ready to read through these so far phenomenal articles. Another thing they tell us, that the Constitution must be good from the characters which compose the convention that framed it. It is graced, by the way, that's a logical fallacy. It is graced with the names of a Washington and a Franklin, illustrious names we know worthy characters in civil society. Yet we cannot suppose them to be infallible guides. Neither yet that a man must necessarily incur guilt to himself merely by dissenting from them in opinion. We cannot think the noble general has the same ideas with ourselves with regard to the rules of right and wrong. Oh, well, looks like I got a little ahead of myself because we're coming to the end of these articles. Never mind, you can unbuckle. Right and wrong. We cannot think he acts a very consistent part, or did through the whole of the contest with Great Britain. Notwithstanding he wielded the sword in defense of American liberty, yet at the same time was, and is to this day, living upon the labors of several hundreds of miserable Africans as free-born as himself, and some of them very likely descended from parents who, in point of property and dignity in their own country, might cope with any man in America. We do not conceive we are to be overborne by the weight of any names, however revered. Quote, all men are born free and equal. Signed, the Yeomanry of Massachusetts. Excellent. So if you have any questions about what was said, there was quite a bit that was said in number 40, maybe questions about what was said in the preceding papers, or if there's a legal topic you'd like me to cover in a future lecture, go ahead and post those down in the comments, because the entire purpose of the Calhoun School of Law is to provide you with the necessary skills and information to combat any sort of lawfare that will be waged against you, your loved ones, or your hard-earned property. So please, if you have any questions at all, go ahead and post them down in the comments. Excellent. So my name is Caleb Glick. I'm a lawyer here in the great state of Texas with the Calhoun School of Law to bring you a lot of information that plenty of bad folks would rather you not have. I hope you enjoyed this lecture, and if not, while you're down in the comments, go ahead and let me know how I can do better so I can best serve that purpose of helping you. I hope you'll have a wonderful day, and I'm not sure what the topic for the next lecture is going to be, but I'll do my best to make it as informative and entertaining as this one, if not more so. Regardless of the topic of the next lecture, until I see y'all then, I bid you all farewell.